On a bright Saturday morning, the service bays at Sterling Performance Motors were packed with customers waiting for expensive repairs. Mechanics hurried from one lift to another while the smell of engine oil filled the air. A sleek Porsche 911 rolled into the center bay and stopped with a rough idle. Behind the wheel was Victoria Hayes, the confident CEO of a successful automotive technology company. She owned several luxury cars, including a prized Lamborghini, and she wasn't used to hearing the words, "We can't find the problem." 3 certified technicians had already spent 2 days diagnosing the Porsche. They replaced sensors, updated the software, and ran every electronic test available. The warning light kept returning, and the engine continued to hesitate. Standing quietly in the corner was Ethan Brooks, a widowed single father raising his 9-year-old son, Noah. Ethan worked at the shop as a maintenance technician after stepping away from his own restoration garage years earlier so he could spend more time with his son. While changing a light fixture near the service area, Ethan overheard the mechanics debating another expensive repair. He glanced toward the Porsche. Then back to his work. Victoria noticed. "You look like you have an opinion," she said with a smile. Ethan hesitated. "I might." The mechanics chuckled. One of them folded his arms. "Go ahead." Ethan walked over, listened to the engine for a few moments, then asked Victoria a strange question. "Does it only happen after the engine warms up?" She blinked. "Yes." He nodded. "Has anyone checked the vacuum line behind the intake manifold?" Silence. One mechanic frowned. "We already scanned the system." "I didn't ask about the scan," Ethan replied politely. "I asked about the hose." Victoria laughed. "If you fix this Porsche," she joked while pointing toward the bright green Lamborghini parked outside, "I'll give you my Lamborghini." The employees laughed. Ethan smiled politely. "I don't need your Lamborghini." He borrowed a flashlight, reached behind the engine, and found a tiny cracked vacuum hose hidden beneath another component. He removed it. Walked into the parts room. Returned with a simple replacement costing just $6. Within minutes, the new hose was installed. The engine started. Perfectly smooth. No warning lights. No hesitation. The mechanic stared at the diagnostic screen in disbelief. Every error code had disappeared. Victoria stood silently beside the car. She looked at the receipt. The replacement part had cost exactly $6. Then she looked at Ethan. "You just solved a problem 3 technicians couldn't fix." Ethan handed her the old cracked hose. "Sometimes," he said with a smile, "the most expensive problems have the cheapest solutions." Victoria slowly closed the hood. Then she picked up the Lamborghini keys. Walked toward Ethan. And said something that left the entire workshop speechless. The workshop fell silent as Victoria held out the Lamborghini keys. Every mechanic stopped what they were doing. Even customers waiting in the lobby looked through the glass to see what was happening. Ethan smiled politely and shook his head. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but I was hoping you'd keep your car." Victoria looked surprised. "You're refusing a Lamborghini?" Ethan laughed. "My son would love to see it." He glanced toward the sports car parked outside. "But I'd rather drive home in the old pickup we've already made a lot of memories in." The room filled with quiet laughter. Victoria slowly lowered the keys. "You really weren't joking?" "No. You don't want it?" "I never fixed your Porsche to win a bet." For a moment, Victoria simply stared at him. She had spent years surrounded by people who chased expensive things. Yet the first man to refuse one of the most valuable gifts she had ever offered was standing in front of her wearing oil-stained work clothes. "So," she asked, "what do you want?" Ethan thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "Take better care of the people who work here." The mechanics looked at one another. Victoria folded her arms. "Explain." Ethan pointed toward the service bays. Those 3 technicians aren't bad mechanics. Everyone looked surprised. They relied on diagnostic computers because that's what modern shops encourage. He held up the tiny cracked hose. The computer only reported the symptoms. It couldn't see this. Victoria nodded slowly. They don't need to be embarrassed. They need time to keep learning. His words stayed with her. The following week, Victoria announced a new training program across all of her service centers. Experienced technicians would spend time teaching younger mechanics traditional diagnostic skills alongside modern technology. Instead of rewarding only speed, the company would reward careful problem solving. Months later, customer satisfaction reached record highs. Repairs became more accurate. Unnecessary parts replacements dropped dramatically. One afternoon, Victoria visited the same workshop again. She found Ethan helping Noah change the oil in the old pickup truck. Noah looked up proudly. "Dad says every bolt has a story." Victoria smiled. "That sounds like your father." Ethan laughed. "I probably say that too often." She handed him a small envelope. "This isn't a Lamborghini." He looked inside. It contained an offer to become the company's director of technical training. The position would allow him to teach mechanics across the country while keeping flexible hours for Noah. Ethan looked at the offer thoughtfully. "You read the part about flexible hours?" he asked. Victoria smiled. "I know your most important job starts after school ends." A few weeks later, Ethan accepted. His first class wasn't about engines. It wasn't about luxury cars. It wasn't even about tools. He placed the old $6 vacuum hose on a table in front of dozens of technicians. "This," he said, "is the most